The scent of fresh asphalt and ambition hung in the air of the newly developed Oak Haven Estates, a manicured suburb where six-figure salaries bought you a slice of beige and gray tranquility. For Mark Sterling, it was the culmination of a decade of grinding. Late nights, missed holidays, and enough coffee to float a battleship. His prize wasn't just the sprawling modern farmhouse with its stark black trim, but the machine parked in its three-car garage, a Rivian R1T, its glacier white, paint job gleaming under the recessed lighting. It was more than a truck. It was a statement, a monument to his success. The crown jewel of his setup was the ChargePoint Home Flex, a sleek, Wi-Fi-enabled Level 2 charger mounted just inside the garage. He'd paid an electrician a small fortune to run a dedicated 60-amp circuit, ensuring his electric beast could drink down a full charge overnight. The first week was bliss. He'd pull in, the satisfying thunk of the charging cable locking into place like a key in a vault, and wake up to a full 300 miles of range. The first anomaly was subtle, easy to dismiss. He had a critical pitch meeting in the city, and hours. Drive away. He'd plugged the truck in the night before with 40% battery left, expecting the usual 100% by morning. But when he slid into the driver's seat, the dash glowed with an unwelcome surprise. 68%. "What the hell?" Mark muttered, tapping the screen. The charging history was a blank slate, as if it had simply stopped in the middle of the night. A flicker of annoyance soured his morning routine. He chalked it up to a software bug, a new owner kink to be worked out. He made the meeting on fumes, his anxiety a knot in his stomach the entire drive, and had to spend 20 minutes at a public fast charger before heading home. 2 days later, it happened again, this time 72%. The annoyance hardened into suspicion. He checked the breaker panel in the garage. Nothing was tripped. He inspected the cable, running his hands along its thick, rubberized length. No damage. He opened the ChargePoint app on his phone, his brow furrowed. The session log was maddeningly vague. It showed a session started at 10:15 p.m., then abruptly ended at 1:47 a.m. No error message, no power outage reported in the area. It had just stopped. That evening, as he stood in his driveway pondering the mystery, he saw her. Karen Fletcher, his next-door neighbor, was wrestling groceries from the back of her brand-new Volvo XC90 Recharge, a plug-in hybrid that screamed suburban eco-warrior. Karen and her husband, a perpetually flustered man named Bob, had moved in a month before him. They were the self-appointed neighborhood watch, the type of people who measured the height of your grass with a ruler and left passive-aggressive notes about recycling bins left out an hour too long. Having trouble with "Your big toy, Mark?" Karen called out, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. Her voice had a grating, condescending quality, as if she were addressing a child who'd lost his favorite Tonka truck. "Just a little charging issue," Mark replied, forcing a neutral tone. "Probably just a software glitch." "Oh, you have to be so careful with those things," she said, slamming the Volvo's liftgate shut. "All that electricity just sitting there. It's a fire hazard, you know. I read an article." Mark just nodded, the conversation already exhausting him. He retreated into his garage, the mystery of the phantom power loss gnawing at him. It was the way she'd looked at the truck, a strange mix of envy and disdain that stuck with him. The next morning, the truck was at 55%, and that's when he saw it. A small, muddy scuff mark on the pristine white paint of the Rivian, right next to the charging port, and a single, long strand of dyed blonde hair caught in the hinge. It was the exact shade of Karen's. A cold, heavy certainty settled in his gut. It wasn't a glitch. It was sabotage. But why? His wife, Chloe, a pragmatic architect who balanced his tech-obsessed brain, was skeptical. "She's unplugging your truck in the middle of the night? Why would she do that? It makes no sense." "I don't know," Mark said, pacing their kitchen. "Maybe she thinks it's a fire hazard, like she said. Maybe she's just crazy." but I know it's her. You can't just accuse someone of that without proof, Mark. This is Oakhaven. A nasty rumor travels faster than an Amazon delivery drone. Chloe was right. Accusations without proof were just gossip. He needed evidence. That afternoon, he drove to Best Buy and purchased a Wise security camera, a tiny, discreet cube he could hide among the clutter on his garage shelves. He positioned it carefully, giving it a perfect, unobstructed view of the Rivian and the Charger, and set it to record on motion. He felt a pang of guilt, like he was stooping to some voyeuristic level, but the anger at the violation of his property quickly extinguished it. That night, he plugged the truck in as usual, the app showing a healthy connection. He barely slept, his phone buzzing on the nightstand with every notification, a raccoon waddling across the driveway, a neighbor's cat on the prowl. He resisted the urge to check the live feed, forcing himself to wait. At 6 a.m., his alarm blared. He immediately grabbed his phone, his heart pounding. He opened the Wise app. There was a motion alert from 2:03 a.m., a 10-minute clip. He took a deep breath and pressed play. The grainy night vision footage flickered to life. The garage was silent, bathed in the eerie green glow of the camera's infrared LEDs. Then, a shadow moved. The side door from Karen's yard creaked. Open. A figure slipped in, wrapped in a fluffy pink bathrobe and slippers. It was Karen. Mark's blood ran cold. He watched, mesmerized and horrified as she moved with a practiced confidence. She walked straight to the Charger, her face a mask of smug entitlement. She glanced around, then firmly gripped the handle of his charging cable and yanked it from the Rivian. The truck's indicator light blinked off, but she didn't just leave. The truly brazen part came next. She unspooled the charging cable from her own garage, a flimsy, standard-issue Level 1 charger that must have taken an eternity, to charge her Volvo, and plugged it into the 120-volt outlet near his workbench. Then, with an audacity that left Mark breathless, she picked up his expensive high-power cable and plugged it into her Volvo, which she'd parked just outside, nose to nose with his property line. The indicator light on the charge point unit glowed green, and a small light on her car's dashboard illuminated. She was stealing his electricity. Not just unplugging him, but actively, deliberately stealing from him. He watched the rest of the 10-minute clip. She stood there for a moment, arms crossed, looking at his truck and then at her own, as if admiring her handiwork. She even let out a little, self-satisfied sigh before slipping back out the side door. A second clip, from 5:30 a.m., showed her returning, unplugging his cable from her car, plugging his truck back in, and scurrying away. She was covering her tracks, leaving him just enough charge so that he wouldn't be completely empty, hoping he'd keep blaming a technical fault. The sheer, calculated nerve of it was staggering. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, the phone trembling, in his hand. Chloe was awake now, watching the color drain from his face. "What is it?" He didn't say a word. He just handed her the phone and played the video again. Her eyes widened, her jaw tightening with every second of footage. When it was over, she looked at him, her usual calm replaced by a cold fury. "That woman is charging her car with our electricity?" "For the last week, at least," Mark said, his voice dangerously low. He pulled up the charging app again, the pieces clicking into place. He cross-referenced the energy consumption data with the times on the video. The app showed a massive sustained power draw exactly between 2 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. He did a quick calculation. Based on their utility rates, she had already stolen nearly $100 worth of electricity. "We have to call the police," Chloe said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is theft. It's trespassing." Mark considered it. But what would the police do? It would be his word, and a grainy video, against a hysterical neighbor in a quiet suburb. It would become a messy, protracted feud. The HOA would get involved. Lawyers. It would turn their dream home into a nightmare. "No," Mark said, a plan beginning to form in the cold, precise corners of his mind. No police, not yet. She thinks she's being clever. She thinks I'm an idiot. She wants to be passive-aggressive. I can be a whole lot more than passive. He got up and walked to the window, staring across the perfectly manicured lawn at the Fletcher house, where a light had just turned on in the kitchen. Karen was probably in there sipping her coffee, feeling smug and secure. She thought she was winning a silent war he didn't even know he was fighting. She had no idea he now had the ultimate weapon, her own arrogance. "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, coming to stand beside him. Mark turned away from the window, a grim smile touching his lips. He looked at his state-of-the-art truck and his high-tech charger. He was a software engineer. He dealt in logic, in systems, in finding and exploiting vulnerabilities. Karen had just revealed a critical flaw in her own system, her predictable, repeatable pattern of theft. "I'm going to build a trap," he said, the words hanging in the air like a promise. "A digital one. She wants to steal my power? Fine. I'm going to let her. And then, when she least expects it, I'm going to shut it off. But not just the power. I'm going to do something so much worse." He picked up his phone, his fingers already flying across the screen, accessing the charger's developer API. "I'm going to make that cable lock onto her car, and it's not going to let go." The kitchen was silent, save for the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator and the frantic tapping of Mark's thumbs on his phone. The grim smile from the bedroom had morphed into a look of intense, surgical focus. He wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was a systems administrator defending his network from a malicious actor. The fact that the network was his garage and the actor was the lady next door in a pink bathrobe only made the violation more personal. Chloe poured 2 cups of coffee, her movements sharp and deliberate. She set one down beside him on the cold quartz island. "Talk to me, Mark. What exactly does make the cable lock onto her car mean? Is that even possible?" "Oh, it's possible," Mark said without looking up. He had the ChargePoint developer documentation pulled up in his browser, scrolling through pages of API calls and command strings. The J1772 connector, the standard plug for most EVs in North America, has a physical locking mechanism. It's a pin that engages to prevent the cable from being yanked out during a high-voltage session. Normally, it's controlled by the car. You unlock the car, the pin retracts, you can unplug. But smart chargers like mine have an override. He spun, his phone around to show her a line of code. "Lock state. True. I can send a command directly to the charger's firmware. Once it's engaged with her vehicle, I can tell it to lock. And it won't unlock until I send another command. Her car's unlock button, the key fob, none of it will matter. The command will be coming from the charger itself." Chloe wrapped her hands around her warm mug, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. "Is that legal? What if she damages her car trying to rip it out? She could sue us." "Let her," Mark shot back, his voice a low growl. "What's she going to say?" "Your Honor, I was trespassing in my neighbor's garage at 2 in the morning, stealing his electricity to charge my car, and his cable got stuck. I have a dozen high-definition videos of her doing it." "This isn't about suing, Chloe. This is about creating a situation so undeniable, so utterly humiliating, that she can't lie her way out of it." He set his phone down and finally met her gaze, his eyes burning with a cold fire she hadn't seen before. "She's not just stealing $100 of electricity. She's violating our home, our sanctuary. She creeps in while we're sleeping, 30 feet from where our daughter is. She's treating our property like a public utility. People like that, they only understand one thing: consequences." The mention of their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, hit home. Chloe's apprehension hardened into resolve. The image of that smirking woman creeping around their garage while they slept made her skin crawl. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. Okay, what's the full plan? For the next hour, Mark worked, his fingers a blur as he coded a simple script on his laptop. It was elegant in its predatory simplicity. He set up a series of triggers, a digital tripwire. First, the script would monitor the charger's status. At exactly 2 a.m., it would check if the charger was connected to his Rivian. If it was, the script would do nothing. But based on Karen's pattern, it wouldn't be. Second, if the Rivian was disconnected, the script would enter a listening state, waiting for the charger to be plugged into a new unauthorized vehicle. The moment the charger registered the electronic handshake with the Volvo's charge port, a 30-minute timer would begin. This would give Karen ample time to get back to her own house and fall comfortably asleep, thinking her heist was a success. Third, at the 30-minute mark, the script would execute its payload. 3 commands would be sent in rapid succession. The first would send the lock state, true command, engaging the physical lock. The second would immediately terminate the power flow, cutting the charge dead. The third would send a push notification to Mark's phone with a simple triumphant message. Trap sprung. Why cut the power? Chloe asked, peering over his shoulder. Wouldn't it be better to let her car charge all night on our dime? Then we could send her a massive bill. No, Mark said, a predatory grin spreading across his face. This is more psychological. She'll wake up expecting a full battery. She'll see her car is still plugged in, but it won't have gained a single mile of range. It will be confusing, maddening. The cable will be stuck, the car won't be charged, and nothing will make sense. The panic will be exquisite. He spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focused anticipation. He did a test run, plugging the charger into his own truck and manually executing the script. He heard the faint click of the locking pin engaging, and when he tried to pull the handle out, it was fused to the vehicle solid as a weld. He sent the unlock command, heard the click of it releasing, and smiled. It worked perfectly. That afternoon, the tension in the house was thick enough to taste. Mark was trying to work, but he kept glancing at the security camera feed on his second monitor. He saw Karen's husband, Bob, meticulously weeding his flower beds, a man blissfully unaware of the drama brewing in the dead of night. Then, around 4 p.m., Karen herself appeared. She was walking her yapping little terrier, letting it do its business right on the edge of Mark's lawn. Mark watched on the camera as she stood there, idly scrolling through her phone, not even bothering to pretend she was going to pick it up. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He stood up, walked out the front door, and started watering the hydrangeas near the property line, his expression a mask of bored indifference. "Afternoon, Mark," Karen called, her voice dripping with that familiar fake sweetness. "Karen," he replied, his tone flat. He gestured with the hose towards the mess her dog had left. "You gonna get that?" Karen's smile tightened. "Oh dear, did he go? I didn't even notice." She fumbled in her pocket and produced a plastic bag with an exaggerated sigh, as if he were putting her through a great ordeal. As she bent down, she glanced at his garage. "Having any more trouble with your charger?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with mock concern. "I hope it's not a faulty unit. You know, you really should get that checked out. An electrical fire would just ruin this neighborhood's property values." The audacity was breathtaking. She was fishing, trying to see if he suspected anything. It took every ounce of Mark's self-control not to tell her exactly what he knew. Instead, he gave her a slow, deliberate smile. "You know, I think I figured it out," he said calmly. "Turns out there's a setting in the app, a schedule. It must have been on by default. I just turned it off. Should be smooth sailing from now on." He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it disappointment? Annoyance? It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual placid mask. "Oh, well, that's wonderful," she chirped. "I'm so glad it was something simple." She tugged her dog's leash and walked away, leaving Mark standing there with the hose in his hand, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had lied, of course. He'd just told her the coast was clear. He'd reassured the thief that the vault was unguarded for another night. She would be back. He was sure of it. That night felt like the longest of his life. He and Chloe put Lily to bed, then sat on the couch in the living room, the TV on mute, their phones in their hands, the Wise camera's live feed open on both screens. The garage was a silent, green-lit stage, the white Rivian and the sleek black Charger waiting patiently. "What if she doesn't do it tonight?" Chloe whispered, her voice taut with anxiety. "What if you spooked her?" "She'll do it," Mark said with confidence. "People like her are arrogant. They think everyone else is stupid. My telling her it was a software glitch just confirmed her belief that I'm a clueless idiot. She'll be back." Midnight came and went. Then 1 a.m. The neighborhood was dead silent. Every creak of the house made them both jump. At 1:30 a.m., Mark's phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from the camera. They both leaned in, their breath held. It was just a possum, its eyes glowing in the infrared light as it scurried along the back wall. They let out a collective sigh. At exactly 2:03 a.m., another motion alert came through. This one was different. The side door to the garage was easing open, a silent black slice in the glowing green image. A figure in a pink bathrobe slipped inside. "Showtime," Mark whispered, his pulse thrumming. They watched the grimly familiar pantomime unfold. Karen moved with an air of total ownership. She unplugged the heavy cable from the Rivian with a practiced tug. She dragged it across the concrete floor, the motion soundless on the video feed. She disappeared from frame for a moment to plug it into her Volvo, parked just out of sight. A few seconds later, the indicator light on the charge point unit flared to life, casting a soft blue glow in the dark garage. She had taken the bait. Mark started the 30-minute countdown timer on his phone. He and Chloe sat in absolute silence, watching Karen on the screen as she stood for a moment, admiring her work, before disappearing back out the side door. The next 30 minutes were agonizing. The empty garage on the screen was a still life of imminent chaos. Mark's leg bounced nervously. Chloe chewed on her thumbnail. 20 seconds, Mark breathed, his eyes glued to the timer. He had the script's execution window open on his laptop. He watched the log file, waiting for the trigger. 10, 9, 8. He could feel Chloe's hand gripping his arm. 7, 6, 5. This was it. The point of no return. 4, 3, 2, 1. On his laptop screen, a new line of text appeared. Timer elapsed. Executing payload. Another line followed instantly. Command sent. Lock state true. A third. Command sent. Session terminate. Then his phone S. Sleep was a forgotten luxury. Mark and Chloe spent the pre-dawn hours on the couch, the glow of the security camera feed painting their tense faces. They were running on a cocktail of caffeine, adrenaline, and a grim sense of impending chaos. Every sound from outside, a newspaper hitting a driveway, a dog barking in the distance, was a potential start to the main event. The first rays of sun finally broke through the blinds at 5:45 a.m., casting long shadows across their living room. At 6:15 a.m., they saw movement. The light in Karen's kitchen window flicked on. "She's up," Chloe whispered, her voice husky with sleeplessness. She pointed to the screen. "Right on schedule," Mark replied, his own voice a low rumble. He took a long sip of his now cold coffee. "She usually leaves for her yoga class around 6:45. They watched, like scientists observing a specimen in a cage of its own making. The stage was set. Her silver Volvo was parked awkwardly, its nose practically touching the dividing line between their properties. The thick black charging cable snaked from Mark's garage. A dark umbilical cord connecting villain to victim stretched taut across a few feet of pristine lawn. It looked completely out of place in the otherwise immaculate suburban landscape. At 6:40 a.m., Karen's side door opened. She emerged, dressed in expensive-looking yoga pants and a pastel top, a stark contrast to the frumpy pink bathrobe from a few hours prior. She had a gym bag slung over one shoulder and a self-satisfied spring in her step. She walked to her car, humming softly, and opened the driver's side door. Before getting in, she casually reached down to unplug the charger. Her hand closed around the handle. She pulled. Nothing happened. Mark leaned closer to the monitor, a thrill shooting through him. On the screen, Karen's humming stopped. She frowned, a look of mild annoyance on her face. She gave the cable another tug, this time with more force. It remained stubbornly, immovably fixed to her car. The faint thud of her pulling against the lock was just barely audible through the open living room window. Her annoyance quickly curdled into confusion. She peered at the charge port, then at the handle in her hand, as if it had personally betrayed her. She pressed the unlock button on her key fob several times. Beep, 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 beep. Nothing. She tried opening and closing the driver's door. A desperate, nonsensical attempt to reset whatever electronic gremlin she imagined was at fault. Then, she got in the car and turned it on. Mark and Chloe could see the dashboard light up through the windshield. They couldn't see the charge gauge, but they could imagine her horror. The look on her face when she got out of the car told them everything. The confusion had now morphed into a rising tide of panic. Her face was pale, her movements jerky. Her 6:45 a.m. departure time was ticking closer, and her car was tethered to her neighbor's house with 0 extra miles in its battery. She began to pull at the cable in earnest now, yanking at it with both hands, her body thrown back with the effort. The Volvo rocked slightly on its suspension. "She's going to damage her car," Chloe breathed, half horrified, half captivated. "That's her choice," Mark said grimly. Karen was losing her composure. She looked around wildly, her eyes darting from house to house, scanning for any sign of witnesses. The manicured lawns and silent windows of Oakhaven offered no comfort. She was alone in her self-made prison. Her frantic gaze swept over Mark's house, lingering on the dark windows of their living room. For a heart-stopping second, Mark thought she'd seen them, but her focus was on the garage, the source of her predicament. Defeated, she spun around and stormed back into her house. "Round 2, Mark muttered, his knuckles white around his coffee mug. "She's getting Bob." A minute later, the Fletcher's side door burst open again. Karen reappeared, dragging her husband by the arm. Bob was a portly man who looked permanently bewildered, and never more so than now. He was still in his pajamas, a faded polo shirt and plaid flannel pants, and his hair was a mess. "What is it? What's wrong?" They could hear him protest, his voice a confused mumble carried on the morning air. "It's stuck," Karen hissed, pointing a trembling finger at the cable. "This stupid thing is stuck in my car. I can't get it out." Bob blinked at the cable, then at the car, then at Mark's garage, his sleep-addled brain struggling to process the scene. Why is Mark's charger plugged into your car?" "I was just being a good neighbor," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. "I saw it had fallen out of his truck, so I plugged it in for him last night to make sure. It wouldn't get damaged, and then I noticed my car was low, so I just borrowed it for a little bit. His truck was full, and now this piece of junk is broken and it won't let go." It was a spectacular, almost masterful lie, constructed in a split second of pure desperation. Bob, however, didn't seem to be buying it. He just stared at her, a flicker of dawning horror in his eyes, but his wife's panic was the more immediate problem. All right, let me see," he sighed, shuffling over to the car. He grabbed the handle and gave it a firm, sensible wiggle. Nothing. He pulled harder, bracing his foot against the tire. The cable didn't budge. He got down on his hands and knees, peering into the charge port as if he could intimidate the locking. Pin into retracting. "It's jammed," he declared, standing up and wiping his hands on his pajama pants. Something in the mechanism must have broken. "Then break it back," Karen screeched. "I have to get to yoga. I'll be late." This was the moment Mark had been waiting for. He stood up, smoothed his shirt, and walked calmly to his front door. "Okay," he said to Chloe. "Don't say a word. Let me handle this." He opened the door and stepped out onto his porch, taking a deep, theatrical breath of the morning air. He held his coffee mug in one hand, affecting an air of perfect, sleepy normalcy. He pretended to notice them for the first time, his eyes widening in mock surprise. "Morning, Karen. Bob," he said, his voice carrying easily across the lawn. "Everything all right over there? You seem to be having some trouble." They both froze, turning to him like deer caught in headlights. Karen's face went white, then a blotchy, furious red. Bob just looked like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. "Mark!" Karen sputtered, immediately shifting into victim mode. Her voice became high and strained. "Thank God you're up. Your charger, it's broken. It's completely busted. It's trapped our car." Mark took a slow, deliberate walk down his driveway, stopping at the edge of his lawn. He surveyed the scene. The tethered car, the flustered husband in his pajamas, the wife vibrating with rage and fear. "My charger?" he asked, his brow furrowed with feigned concern. "That's so strange. It was working perfectly fine for me. But how did it get plugged into your Volvo in the first place? I'm positive I left it plugged into my Rivian when I went to bed." He let the question hang in the air, heavy and sharp. He looked from Karen's panicked face to Bob's deeply uncomfortable one. Bob wouldn't meet his eyes, instead choosing to stare intently at a dandelion growing near his foot. Karen, however, was not one to be silenced by logic. She doubled down, launching into the lie she had prepared for her husband. It must have fallen out. It was just lying on the ground. I didn't want it to get run over, so I plugged it into my car for safekeeping. I was being helpful. And this is the thanks I get. Your faulty, dangerous equipment has taken my car hostage. Fallen out, Mark repeated slowly, savoring the words. He took a sip of his coffee. The J1772 connector has a locking latch. It clicks into place. It can't just fall out, especially not out of a brand new truck. He paused, letting the silence stretch, the quiet hum of the neighborhood's sprinkler systems, the only sound. He looked directly at Karen, his calm expression unwavering. Her bravado was starting to crack, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "That's a very interesting theory, Karen," Mark said, his voice dropping to a cool, almost conversational tone. "A very interesting theory indeed." He took one last sip of his coffee, then gestured with his head toward the front of his garage, pointing to a spot just under the eaves where a tiny black cube sat, its lens aimed directly at them. "Why don't we go and review my security camera? Footage?" he asked, a cold, hard smile finally breaking through his mask of neutrality. "It records all night. I'm sure it will clear this whole misunderstanding right up."